All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having an incredible week. We got a double show day for you today, so we're going short this morning. We're just going to hit one game from last night. The Denver Nuggets went into Minnesota and beat the Timberwolves, albeit very shorthanded. We had a weird slate last night. Of the other four games that were played, 5 of those 8 teams were below 500. So we're just focusing in on Nuggets Timberwolves as a game reaction. After that, LeBron James and JJ Redick had their first episode of their Mind the Game podcast, and there were several basketball concepts that were hit in that show that I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into. So we'll do that in our middle segment. And then at the end, I've got 4 mailbag questions for us, some follow-ups from yesterday's stuff about the GOAT debate, as well as some stuff about the Warriors and Bam Adebayo, who's made 5 of his last 5 threes in the last 4 games. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss any more of our show announcements or film threads. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. It's also helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. And last but not least, keep dropping mailbag questions in the YouTube comments so we can keep hitting them throughout the rest of the season. And then before we get started, this is the best time of year to go out to a basketball game. Yes, we enjoy watching basketball on our couches as much as we can in our busy lives, but this is the best time of year to get out to an arena. And I don't think there's a better version of the in-person basketball fan experience than going to an NCAA tournament game. I've been fortunate to go to an Elite Eight game before in my life. And when you go to these NCAA tournament games, they have these like crazy crowd dynamics where both teams have incredible support in the arena, and it's kind of like a wave back and forth that follows the flow of the game as the momentum swings back and forth. And in addition to that, it's single elimination basketball, and it's really hard to beat that level of urgency and intensity, especially as you get into the later rounds. So make sure you guys get out to an arena and see a game. Don't forget about our playoff basketball for the NBA as well. We got some older stars, guys like Steph, LeBron, and KD. If Steph and LeBron are lucky enough to get in, given their predicament in the play-in tournament, but this might be some of our last opportunities to see these guys in person playing meaningful basketball. So I want you guys to check out Game Time. They have an amazing ticket buying experience. You can actually get a ticket in 2 taps, so there's not a convoluted process. You can find all-in pricing, so you know exactly how much you're going to pay. No worrying about putting something in the cart and then going to check out and then finding out you have to pay a lot more. And you have a really good idea of what seat you are getting. They give you a good visual of what the view looks like from your seat. That way you show up to the arena and you're finding out you're getting exactly what you're paying for. They even have cool deals, things like zone deals, where you pick a section and then Game Time picks the seats for you. They have exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football and basketball and baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code HOOPS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's talk some basketball. So Nuggets Timberwolves was kind of a funky game. The Timberwolves had just played the previous night in Utah, had one of those crazy like back-to-back things where they got back into town at like 3 a.m. Rudy Gobert's already out with an injury. Now Naz Reid, as a result of the back-to-back, is out. And obviously Karl Towns is out with the meniscus tear. So all of a sudden you have an incredibly small Minnesota Timberwolves team that typically obviously brings a very massive front line to the table. And so they started without a center in this game. They brought Nickeil Alexander-Walker into the starting lineup and slid Kyle Anderson down to center. Brought Luka Garza down, off the bench, who obviously has his own limitations physically against some of the bigger centers in the league, and he can shoot the ball, which kind of brings a similar dynamic to guys like Karl Towns and Naz Reid, but just not enough size on the front line. And Timberwolves, they fought admirably. They went down big early. They went on a big run, but really it felt like whenever Denver was, able to kind of engage themselves for a couple of minutes, they were able to pull away. I thought the key stretch of the game was in the middle of the fourth quarter. I've talked a lot about like the Denver rotation, and one of the ways that it kind of swings is to start the second and fourth quarters. They'll go with like Jamal Murray and a bench group, and they'll switch everything and they'll flow a lot through Jamal on the ball and kind of just let him pick his spots and really lean on one-on-one basketball, just kind of matchup hunting. But then they go into like a phase in the middle of the second quarter, middle of the fourth quarter, where they take Jamal off and they bring the starters on, basically. And it's usually the starters, but with Reggie Jackson in for Jamal Murray. It was a little funky in this middle of the fourth quarter stretch because I'm not sure exactly why, but they left Aaron Gordon out longer. So Justin Holiday was in the group. It was a little bit of a smaller lineup. I think that might have been an attempt to try to generate some more spacing because obviously when the Wolves went smaller, they went smaller with a ton of really good perimeter defenders. And so obviously to beat really good perimeter defenders off the dribble and to try to get into the lane and get good shots, sometimes it helps to have a little bit more spacing. I'm guessing that's what they were going with, but who knows? But Aaron Gordon was out, so it was basically the starters with Justin Holiday and Reggie Jackson in for Gordon and Murray. And they went really heavy into the Michael Porter Jr. and Nikola Jokic two-man game. And the Wolves had gone up 4. They were up 4 in that kind of middle portion of the fourth quarter off of a Luka Garza free throw. And they go down and they run MPJ Jokic two-man game a couple of possessions in a row. It's a textbook example of the setup and the fake. So they start with the dribble handoff. Jokic pitches it to MPJ. MPJ comes off going to his left-hand side, hard step back dribble, knocks down a 3 on the left wing. And then on the very next possession, they go to run the exact same thing. MPJ positions himself. The defender's getting physical with him and trying to bump him off of that line. And MPJ just stunts like he's going to come off the dribble handoff and cuts back door. Jokic hits him on the slip. He dunks on a bunch of people underneath the basket. So now we've run the same dribble handoff sequence just with the fake on the back end. We get 5 easy points. They go down, they get a stop, and MPJ in transition hits a step back jump shot over Jaden McDaniels, beating him with kind of like a pump fake and then a little off the dribble move going towards his left. And it was a great example of what we talk about a lot, which is, Michael Porter Jr., in my opinion, has a lot more dribble pop, a lot more, kind of like ability to scale up offensively than he even shows for large portions of the season. And, when he has an opportunity to kind of get more of the offense run directly through him, he can show you that he can be a guy that can kind of anchor an offense for a stretch. And I thought that swung the game. Like Minnesota had a ton of momentum. Anthony Edwards was playing out of his mind, making all these crazy shots. About a half dozen highlights from Anthony Edwards in this game. And it just kind of felt like the momentum was heading Minnesota's way. And when I tell you that sequence, those 3 possessions completely flipped the game. And then Jokic hit 3 threes in the fourth quarter, and just like that, the game was basically over. I wanted to talk about Jokic working on his jumper for a little bit because I thought this was a clear kind of tone that he was setting early. So he was being guarded by Kyle Anderson, and he had plenty of opportunities to just kind of physically bully his way to the basket. And the dead giveaway was early in the game. Jokic was just bombing fadeaways out of the post. And I think he made 1 or 2 of them, but he was missing a lot of them. But he was just bombing fadeaways. And then you go into the end of the game and he's bombing these long threes, and some of them are contested and earlier in the shot clock. And I'm like, this is interesting. And I really think Jokic is just trying to polish up his jump shot to get ready for the postseason. This is something I've talked about a good amount this year, but like, the one thing I still, even in spite of this, I think Jokic is the best player in the world by a comfortable margin. But if you had to nitpick Jokic for something this year, he just hasn't been as accurate as a jump shooter as he was last year. To give you an idea, last year in the regular season, a Jokic jump shot was worth 1.17 points per shot. And in the postseason, it went up from 1.17 to 1.21 points per jump shot. So from basically training camp through to when they hoisted the trophy, Jokic was making his jumper at just a preposterous rate. Before the last couple of games this season, he had been down to 0.99 points per jump shot. And in the last couple of games, he shot well enough to tick it up, but still at this point for the entire season, he's at 1.01 points per jump shot. So basically, like to put it simply, he is about somewhere between 15 and 20% worse as a jump shooter this year as he was last year. Now, the big what I've been saying is like, it's not so much whether or not he's bombing the exact same types of really difficult shots that he was last year in the postseason, because I really do think that Jokic just kind of was in his zone in a lot of ways, and he was hitting some really, like, he had a bunch of the somber shuffle shots and just a bunch of really absurdly difficult shots. I'm more concerned about it in the perspective of the pick and pop. Like, I don't really look at those individual, like, crazy shots as massive swing factors over the course of a playoff run. Like, those are big plays and they obviously serve their purpose, but those get categorized for me under rescue possessions, which is like, this is like there's a few seconds on the shot clock and we're just throwing something up. I'm more concerned about, like, a big part of Jokic's offense last year was the pick and pop. And, hitting not just the pick and pop three, but getting a lot of closeout opportunities off that, where he pump fake and then kind of rumble down the lane towards his left-hand side and get all the way to the rim for a layup, or be able to make really good kick-out reads for high-quality shots from there. It hasn't been a problem in the regular season for the most part, because obviously Jokic is still the best player in the world, and over the course of the 82, it's just not something that's going to manifest. But I do think that it's an important element to him being able to counter some of the very best teams at the top of the league when we get to the later rounds of the postseason. And so I think what was really encouraging about last night is I think Jokic knows that, because Jokic is very much not the kind of guy this year that would be bombing fadeaways when he has a significant size advantage, or taking somewhat early clock contested threes. I think Jokic senses the urgency. I think he knows he's going to need that shot to a certain extent when he gets into the postseason, and I think he's ramping up now. He's like, it's middle March. Today's March 20th. We got like 3 weeks or so until we get into the 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks, or whatever, until we get into the postseason. And I think he's just trying to build it out, trying to build that rhythm, regain that confidence. We'll be keeping an eye on his jump shot over the course of the last few weeks of the regular season here, because I think that's going to be a strong indicator. Because here's the thing: if he shoots the ball like he did last year, they're just going to win again. That, to me, is like what makes Jokic being just a complete and total dead-eye jump shooter pretty much makes Denver unbeatable. And I think Jokic has identified that and is really trying to build it out. On the Wolves front, I want to talk about Ant for a minute. I've had a lot of fun watching him this year. He won me over in a lot of ways last year. I became a huge fan of the Timberwolves towards the tail end of the season, as just a team that brought an insane level of physicality on the defensive end of the floor. And I just am a huge believer in Ant. I think he's the one American player that has, like, the real potential to rival these European bigs that are killing everybody, right? And watching him lately has reminded me a lot of young LeBron James. And they're not very similar as players, but they are similar as transcendent athletes. And it kind of reminds me of young LeBron in the sense, like, when you watched young LeBron, and I'm talking like 2003 to 2010, like that first Cleveland stint, it was like every single night you watched him, he was making a half dozen highlight plays. And they were all different, right? It'd be like a crazy tip dunk, classic transition run out, some sort of half-court driving dunk in traffic that just defies any sort of logic. One of the similarities that I see between Ant and LeBron and their younger phase is the ability to take and make extremely difficult jump shots. When we talk about movement jump shots, so like that's anything that's flying off a screen and rising up and shooting some sort of dribble combination into a shot, post fadeaways, all that kind of stuff. The difficulty in those shots is not actually in the release, it's in the legs. It's in the base. I have found personally, when I'm taking post fades, step back threes, things along those lines, as long as I get my lift, meaning like I get enough separation to get to my spot and I get great lift on the shot, the actual shot itself is just a jump shot. That's all it is. And as long as you have the appropriate amount of lift, it feels more or less like a normal, catch and shoot jump shot does. There occasionally can get to another level of difficulty when you're drifting, because obviously the aiming element is a little bit different, but it's all about legs. Those shots are all about legs. And LeBron, when he was young, and Anthony Edwards in this phase of his career, they have just this preposterous level of athleticism to where they can elevate out of really any spot or footwork or dribble combination and get great lift. And so they get to these so the highlights for Ant, it's not just the dunks. It's not just the there's some footwork stuff we're going to get to in a second that he does too, but a lot of it is like really high level difficult jump shot making off of the virtue or off of the strength and power of his incredible athleticism and his leg strength. We're seeing all this like another big element of the Ant highlight reel has been footwork as of late. And I think a lot of times we don't associate footwork as a skill when it really is. Like, you work on ball handling, you work on shooting, but footwork is what connects all of those things. The only thing that will ever make it so that you can use your ball handling to get to a spot and then actually make a shot in that spot, the bridge that connects those two things is footwork. And so the two main pieces of footwork that I wanted to dive into for Ant are his slow down steps. So this is one of the things he does in the lane where, like, he's this freaky athlete, but he'll slow down and take long, powerful steps. And one of the things that does is when Ant beats a guy off the dribble, everyone's trying to recover back into space. So a lot of times by slowing down, he can find openings because the dudes who are recovering into the play are coming in too fast. And so when he slows himself down, he can kind of wait for an opening to generate and then kind of slide into that opening and go. He'll hit Euro steps out of that. He'll hit like sidestep, like kind of hooks and floaters and things like that. And then the second big one is step throughs. And this is a fundamental part of a fundamental counter to the post fade. And this kind of originally, we talk a lot about Kobe and MJ with this stuff, and Ant has definitely taken a big part of this, but like, we don't really see a lot of guys in the NBA that utilize the step through these days. We see post fades. There are a lot of guys that take post fades, but the step through is kind of something that is a little bit of a lost art in the NBA. And it's been a big thing in the women's game. I've noticed, like, the step through is very prominent when you watch women's college hoops and WNBA basketball, where like the footwork is really sharp at that level. Skill development in general in the women's game is super, super sharp. But like, essentially what a step through is, when you think of a right shoulder fade and a left shoulder fade, the footwork, the way it works is like, if I have my back to the basket and I kind of pivot back and then I pivot over my right shoulder to take a right shoulder fade, I'm planting my left foot, right, as I elevate into the shot. And if I take a left shoulder fade over this shoulder, I'm planting my right foot as I'm coming around to elevate, and I'm trying to square up in midair. So basically all you're doing on a step through is, let's start with the right shoulder fade. As I'm coming around to plant for that right shoulder fade, I pump fake, and then I just continue to pivot around. So it's like, it is basically a double pivot. It's the exact same footwork that you would to plant to elevate, but I'm planting again and pushing off and propelling myself forward towards the rim. And one of the things that it's interesting, because I never saw it until it became super popular in the women's game, but you can actually take another step on your step through. And that's something you did not see in the NBA when you go back to the Kobe's and the MJs, that it was in the rule book, but it just wasn't something that players practiced and did. When you take that extra step, you don't have to jump off 2 feet. You can actually step through with that extra foot, and they consider it part of like your gather and as part of your gather step, so it's not a travel. And so you can step through and actually get way closer to the rim and get easy shots. And so Ant hit 2 of those last night. One on I want to say he hit one on Aaron Gordon and then one on Michael Porter Jr. And so against bigger players, you used footwork to get around them in the post. And like, it kind of, the way it kind of reminds me of the young LeBron piece is, it almost feels like he knows he's so supremely gifted that he's just kind of trying shit sometimes. Like, let me try this move. Let me try that move. This shot is really difficult, but screw it. Let's just try it, like that sort of thing. And like, it's funny because when I think about the future of Ant, that's where I also think about the LeBron trajectory, in the sense that, like, when LeBron got out of there into Miami, he became more obsessed with efficiency. And then it was less about trying stuff and like hyper focusing on the things that he's already great at. And what's like, I talk about low hanging fruit in basketball. I talk about how young players, when they grow up, what happens is they get really good at identifying what works and repeating that, and really good at identifying what doesn't work and stopping doing that. And that really is the pathway to efficiency. And so Ant is kind of in that young phase of his career where, like, the efficiency, like, I think he had 30 last night, but he took like 26 shots or something like that. Or it was like 28 points on 26 shots or something like that. It wasn't the most efficient game that Anthony Edwards has ever had. And that obviously is something that's going to be kind of part of his story at this phase of his career. But he will reach a point where he's past the young, exciting, just trying stuff phase, and he's going to enter into like a, what am I great at? What do I need to work on? How do I up my efficiency? And then that's when he's going to leap to an entirely different level. I saw a clip on Twitter this morning of him doing an interview with Taylor Rooks. And she asked him on a scale of 1 to 10 where he was in his potential, and he said 5 out of 10. And then he started talking about Kevin Durant, how he's his favorite player, how he really wants to get to the point where KD is, where every single shot looks the same. And I've talked a lot on this concept on the show, but like a jump shot is like muscle memory. Even in off the dribble combination types of stuff, you really want to just tweak the things that come before the shot. But when you elevate, you want it to look more or less like your catch and shoot jump shot. That's where you can reach real consistency as a jump shooter. And when essentially it's about triggering a muscle memory that you've done so many thousands of times that you get more consistency out of it, right? And that to me is where I get really excited about Ant's potential in the long run. Is like he's got all of this ability now, but he hasn't even really figured out how to make it into something that's consistent and efficient yet. And when he figures that out, it's just watch out, man. And that's why I look at him as the one guy, the one American player who can enter into that conversation with Giannis and Embiid and Jokic and Luka and those guys. Last hit on the Timberwolves, Jaden McDaniels. He had 26 points on 15 shots. Was trying to dunk everything in this game. Kind of reminds me of what happens when an athlete discovers his athletic advantage and how like that kind of unlocks a level of aggressiveness. And the dead giveaway to me was in the fourth quarter. There was a play where I can't remember if it was on a cut or on a closeout, but he was driving along. I think it was on a pocket pass. But when he caught the ball, he was rolling and Jokic was waiting for him at the rim. And he caught the ball kind of in the right block, kind of extended out a little bit. And if you freeze frame it right when he catches it, Jokic is kind of in his way. And I remember as I was watching it live, I'd never even conceived that he might dunk it. And he just literally rose up over Jokic. And Jokic even was surprised by it. He was like, oh shit. Like he kind of pulled back at the last second. And Jaden just threw down this like jackhammer right-handed dunk. And like, to me, it's like, that's where Jaden has started to realize like no one can actually kind of contend with him above the rim, or not many people can contend with him above the rim. And that to me is like, because he's shown high level shot making, right? He's got that little drifting jumper that he hits. He can knock down a 3-point shot at a big and one late in this game. But like really where he has his supreme advantage is in his length and athleticism. And like that was what was crazy about that. 26 points on 15 shots, getting to the foul line a lot just by going aggressively to the rim and just getting hit raked across the arms and stuff like that. People are going to hit the arm instead of the ball just because of his athleticism. So again, not too much to take away from this game for the Timberwolves, just simply because of the fact that so many guys were out, but they had won 3 in a row before that. So they're playing some good basketball. The Nuggets are just going to be tough to beat in that situation when you're giving up those kinds of advantages. The thrill and excitement of March Mania is here, and DraftKings Sportsbook, one of America's top-rated sportsbook apps, is giving new customers a shot to turn $5 into $150 instantly in bonus bets with any college basketball bet. You could bet on absolutely anything. If you want to bet on UConn, or North Carolina fans can get in on this year to bet them to win the title, all the way down to teams like Stetson and Longwood to win the title. You can even bet individual seeds to win the title. You can bet anything on DraftKings for the tournament. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. New customers can bet $5 to get $150 instantly in bonus bets only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. The crown is yours. For our next topic, LeBron James and JJ Redick did a podcast yesterday, something they recorded, it seemed, about a month ago when the Lakers beat the Clippers in that game where LeBron single-handedly outscored them. At least that's kind of the way it was framed at the beginning of the show. My initial takeaway on the show in general was just, it was something that I think is important for the overall scale and scope of basketball coverage, because JJ Redick, in my opinion, is the very best in the world at what I do for a living, meaning like covering the NBA on a national level. I think JJ is the best at it. He obviously does more than what I do as well, because he does color commentary and additional stuff like that, and debate shows and things like that. But specifically within the realm of basketball analysis, I don't think anybody does it better than JJ. And then LeBron James is arguably the most famous basketball player in the world, at least active basketball player. And he brings an incredible amount of IQ to the table, an incredible amount of cachet to the table. You know, specifically what stands out to me is they put up a ridiculous number on YouTube in that show, and it wasn't about anything urgent. Like, it wasn't like we're going to break down what happened in last night's game. It wasn't like we're going to break down this team or that team. It was just generic in a vacuum basketball conversation. And I think like getting that kind of viewership for that sort of like non-urgent topic is just a testament to the power, the star power that those two guys bring to the table, and obviously, namely LeBron, but JJ has reached a certain level of notoriety in his field as well. And so I really enjoyed it. There was a lot of really good conversation. I'll be honest with you, a part of me wishes that this was something that was more consistent and more focused on the actual day-to-day NBA, because I think could be incredible. But it's early, so we'll see what ends up happening over time. I wanted to hit on a couple of specific things that they talked about though. So at the beginning, there was a conversation about the 3 things that make a good basketball player. And there was a specific point that JJ made about something that he calls competitive stamina. And I think this was really interesting to me, because this is a very specific reason why I harp on something called habits, right? There's a reason why I've talked about it with the Suns and the Kings a lot, Suns, Kings, and Mavs a lot as of late. And what I mean by habits is like a habit is something you do unconsciously. A habit is something that is so baked into your routine that you just it's almost easy to do because you're just accustomed to doing it. And the reason why I think habits matter so much is when you get into any sort of situation with adversity, whether it's like a game that's slipping away from you or some sort of emotional adversity or whatever it is that's going on, your habits will carry you through those moments. Because like anything that you're not consistent in, when adversity hits, those will be the first things that you stop doing, right? And then like your true core nature will reveal itself in those situations. And so you need to take your day-to-day routine and make it into a habit, so that is what you lean back on when the shit hits the fan, for lack of a better term, right? And so that, like when JJ talks about competitive stamina, that's literally what I think of when I talk about habits. So specifically, for instance, like for me, I remember shooting workouts. I used to do them relatively casually when I was in my early 20s. And then I heard a lot from younger KD talking about doing your practice reps at game speed. And that was something that, like, when I first started doing was hard, because like you're in an empty gym, and like I have this shooting workout that I do that's like a combination of like 4 or 5 drills. And like I'll give you an example, like a rip through 1 dribble pull-up drill that I do every single day. And like so I pitch the ball out to myself at the top of the key, facing away from the basket, and then I reverse pivot and I rip through as hard as I can, and then I do a left-right takeoff into a pull-up jump shot, and then I do the same thing going left until I make 5 going both ways. Then I move it back with a counter move. So I rip through and then do a counter move and then take off going left, and vice versa, right? And that drill, like when I was doing it casually, was easy, because I just reverse pivot and push the ball out in front, and I'd elevate, and it was just kind of almost like treated it almost like a warm-up. And like all of a sudden you realize you're practicing a shot that you'll never take in a game, because guess what? Never in a basketball game do you get to casually rise up into a jump shot. Like if you're going to take a 1 dribble pull up, if you're going to shoot any sort of off the dribble jump shot against real basketball players, you got to be moving. You got to be moving with real pace and speed. And like, even for a guy who's as big and athletic as I am, like you still have to have a certain amount of pace that you bring to those shots to get them off against good defensive players. Because again, that's the thing, like 6'6" and 6'10" wingspan, like I have, that's tall compared to like the average pickup game, maybe. But like if you go play against, go play at an open gym at a college somewhere, go play against real college athletes when they come back to town, or overseas athletes when they come back to town, and all of a sudden there's a lot of wings that are 6'6" and 6'7" and 6'8", and suddenly you need to have a certain level of verve that you bring to the table to be able to get your shot off, right? And so when you try the drill with like real game speed, and I'm reverse pivoting and I'm ripping through as hard as I can, I'm covering a ton of ground and I'm elevating, it's hard. It hurts your body when you're in your mid-30s. Like it takes a certain amount of of exertion that's hard to do at the beginning of a workout. And when I first started doing it, it was really challenging. But over the course of the weeks, it became a habit for me. And now, like, I literally don't know how to do it any other way. And now when I go up to the gym and I go to do those drills, like I bring a certain level of intensity to it, just because that's the only way I know how to do it. It has become a habit for me. And so as a result of that, like I have this like routine that I stick to every single day. And like even when I don't do it, it feels weird. Like if I happen to skip a shooting workout on one day because of whatever, I'm busy with work, or my wife and I are have some sort of function, or we're out of town, or whatever it is, like it just feels weird, right? And like to me, like that when JJ talks about competitive stamina, that's what I think about. I think about establishing habits and making it so that specific behaviors of yours become habitual. Even something simply like breakfast. I used to never have breakfast, and it was such a stupid thing because I'd deal with these crazy energy swings throughout the day. And now I have a 5-part breakfast every single morning: 3 over medium eggs. I take oatmeal, a banana, a yogurt, and an athletic greens every single day in the morning, first thing in the morning when I wake up. Really hard at first. Now it's a habit. So now, like every morning I wake up, that's just what I do. And that's helped me so much with energy levels throughout the day, because I just get this really big, kind of versatile breakfast every morning that kind of checks all of those boxes, right? And so the second part of it is what fuels a person to build those kinds of habits. Like, what is it that allows a person to get to that point? And couple of things. Love of the game. Both LeBron James and JJ Redick talked about love of the game. I think that is a key element, because obviously, like, it's easy to work on shooting drills. It's easy to get in the gym and work on your game when you love basketball, because like even something still like the only example, the counter that I'd give is like when I was a kid and when I was in high school and I was playing high school football my freshman and sophomore year, I hated practice. So every day when you went to practice, you're just in survival mode. Now, mind you, I was in Arizona, so it's hotter than hell, and you're outside in the sun, and everybody who's played football knows exactly what I'm talking about. But like practice sucked, so it was hard to kind of get up to do it, right? And like, but basketball, it's like when I today because I'm covering Celtics Bucks, I am not going to go to the normal pickup run that I go. So this afternoon, I'm going to go do a shooting workout. And like, that's going to be fun for me. I'm going to put my headphones in. I'll listen to a podcast or listen to some music. And like for 30 to 45 minutes, it's going to be enjoyable for me to do a workout because I love basketball. And so like that is a foundational concept. Secondly, competitiveness. To me, I talk about this on the show a lot, but separating love of the game from hatred of losing, because I do think those are two very different things. I think there are people in the NBA who love basketball but don't hate losing enough to kind of push themselves to that next level. And so I think that is an important element of it. I think the greatest basketball players of all time are all people who both love the game but also hate losing. And then finally, a general lifestyle of excellence. And so what I mean by this, I wanted to use this as an opportunity to shout out a friend of mine, Sam Beskind. He came out of Tucson, playing at Catalina Foothills at the school that I coached. He was coaching, or he played there before I started coaching there, though. But I met him through the program, and he went on to play at Stanford, and then he transferred from Stanford to play at Colorado School of Mines, and he's been there this year, and this year is his final season there. But I worked out with him over the course of the last 3 summers and got to know him personally, and I've never met a human being that approaches every single task in his life with the same level of intensity and discipline and focus and competitiveness. And like, because I'm the exact opposite. I'm like, anything involving my job, which has to do with basketball, I'm locked in. I'm giving it everything I got. Anything having to do with basketball as a player or as a coach, I'm handling it with like 100% of everything that I have. But like, if I wanted to go, if my wife was like, you want to go run a couple miles with me today, I'd have a really hard time pushing myself through that run. If I went on a hike, I'd have a hard time like pushing myself through that hike, because like I'd get through it, but I have a hard time personally like being really engaged in things that I'm not passionate about. And like my buddy Sam, like he just, no matter what it is, whether it's his diet, whether it's school, he was a scholar athlete selection in the Pac-12 when he was at Stanford. He told me a story about how he was in a run on campus with a guy who was a marathoner at Stanford, and he got his butt kicked in the first lap, and so he like pushed himself on the second lap and like actually managed to keep up with the guy, and I'm just I'm so impressed by just his overall like ability to get his his mind and body to peak efficiency and output regardless of what he's doing. And I think all of the best basketball players and best whatever it is that they do and whatever their profession in the world, those people, it's not just that they love their profession, it's not just that they're competitive, they have a general lifestyle of excellence. And like that sort of thing to me is something that kind of goes under the table, or that gets kind of like not given the appropriate level of regard when we talk about these guys. Next, can basketball IQ be learned? This was the third thing that JJ Redick put on his list of things that make a good basketball player. And LeBron and JJ had kind of a back and forth about it. And LeBron talked about some of it being kind of like you're born with, and JJ talked about some of it that can learn. I tend to agree that it can be learned. I separate basketball IQ from the natural gift, which is the ability to process information quickly in the heat of the moment. That to me is the natural part of it, right? So like when I talk about guys like LeBron, Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, Chris Paul, Trae Young, like all of the really, really high level passers in the league, it's a couple of different things. It's not just basketball IQ having to do with understanding reads. We'll talk about that in a minute. A lot of it is a human superpower in that in the heat of action, when lots of shit is going on around them, they can quickly interpret information and make decisions on the fly. That to me is the natural gift that pushes them over the top. That is not learnable. That is something that you're born with, right? But the basketball IQ piece is learned, in my opinion, meaning like the actual nature of the reads. So for instance, let's just talk about pick and roll. So like if I'm running a ball screen on the left side of the floor, I have and we'll talk about this not in the concept of 5 out, but rather in 4 out. So I've got a guy standing in the left corner as a shooter, standing in the right corner as a shooter, standing on the right wing as the shooter, and I've got the guy coming up to set a ball screen so I can get to my right hand downhill. In that situation, you can learn what the reads are. So for instance, defender's icing the screen, meaning he is denying me access to the screen and forcing me towards the baseline side. I can do a couple of different things there as a read. I can either just take that baked-in driving lane, draw the help defender, and make a read from there, or I can use it as an opportunity to set him up for the screen. So a hard dribble to the left, then a counter dribble, and then try to use the screen. Basically trying to get him onto the opposite side of you so that you can use the screen. If he's in a trail position, if I come off of the screen and the guy is not digging down off the shooter on the right wing, and the big man is far back, and I can get some separation from the guy off the screen, I'm taking the 3. If the big is back and they're not digging down off the wing and the guard is chasing over the top and he's doing a good job staying attached, I need to continue to work downhill. And if nobody else comes, I need to get a floater off before I get to the big man. If the big man steps up, that's where the pocket pass is there. If the big man stays back, but there's nail help, meaning the guy coming from the wing, all I need to do is make the swing pass to the wing. If the big man comes up and the pocket pass is not open because they're tagging from the weak side off of the guy in the corner, it's the skip pass to the corner and to hit that shooter, or if he cuts along the baseline. You can learn those reads through film study and just understanding the game, and literally anybody, even someone who's never played basketball in their life, can learn basketball reads. But in the game, what applies those things is a combination of skill, meaning like the ability to dribble and pass and like actually handle a basketball, right? But the second part of it is to be able to quickly process those things. There are lots of guys in the league who understand the reads, but can't pick them up quickly. When you see one of your favorite players in the league go into a ball screen and miss a skip pass or miss an easy read, it's not because he doesn't know that read exists. He knows it's there. He just hasn't processed it. In the heat of the moment, he struggled to see it all, right? And there's no shame in that, because literally it's like only a handful of guys at the top of the league that are that gifted at processing those things on the ball that quickly, right? Now, there's a middle tier there in terms of processing speed and IQ, and this is where we get all the high IQ role players and things along those lines. Those guys, they can make reads relatively quickly in their specific role, and there's a ton of value there as well. But when I'm talking about the stars at the top of the league, it is kind of rare to have a guy that can quickly process those things super quickly every single time, get the ball in the right spots every single time. Two other quick ones before we move on. LeBron's point about centers naturally wanting to drop towards the rim on help on drives, even if they're guarding shooters. This is I just thought this was funny because this is something we talked about on the show over the last few weeks. Specifically, I think it was when we were talking about the Cavs game, when Cavs Celtics, when Porzingis kept leaving Dean Wade open on the perimeter. I talked about the natural inclinations of centers and their tendency to want to drop back towards the rim and to be in a position to help. And like how sometimes a player's natural tendencies will go against whatever the game plan discipline is. And so LeBron made a point about how like when he sees in a switch situation a center guarding the shooter in the strong side corner and he's on the strong side wing, LeBron will just drive really hard towards that right-hand side because he knows, even though the center is not supposed to help off the strong side wing or strong side corner, he knows he wants to because it's his natural inclination. And I thought that was really, really fascinating because, like, again, like there are these like little tendencies that you can capitalize on. And that's a great example of one. Is just like centers have a tendency to want to help. So if you drive in their general direction, you might be able to get an open three just simply based on that center's specific tendencies. And then finally, LeBron and JJ had a long conversation about the Warriors beating the Celtics in the 2022 finals because of IQ and not talent. I just thought that was interesting because it's LeBron James saying it. And that's something that me and Colin talked about a ton heading into that series and after that series. We both said before that series, we thought the Celtics were the more talented team, but that we expected the Warriors to win on the strength of their experience and on Steph Curry being the best player in the series. And I 100% agree. LeBron went on this rant about how the top 4 teams in the league, when you get to the conference finals, those teams are all generally very good and all have lots of talent. And what separates from those 4 is IQ. And I thought that was really fascinating because, again, like margins get really tight at that point, and what swings margins are little tiny details, and teams that have high IQ don't make as many mistakes in the details. All right, quick mailbag, and then we're out of here. I heard you speak on why Kelly Oubre has been very smart with his reads on screen and rolls and getting open dunks on his tags. I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to just start that one over. I heard you speak on why Kelly Oubre has been very smart with his reads on screen and rolls and getting open dunks when it says in his tags the roller, but I'm assuming he means when the roller is tagged. If this is the case, why was he just not a good fit in Golden State? My impression was that he just wasn't good enough at the free-flowing read and react type of offense and couldn't figure out how to gel well enough with Steph Curry. So I agree, but this is a classic example of the difference between a 4-out offense and a 5-out offense. So, for instance, if you are in a situation where you are spotting up in the corner and they're running 2-man game, and you are watching your low man, right? So the guy who's guarding you is now the low man. So if I'm in the corner, ball screen's on the opposite wing, the guy who's guarding me, his job is, if there's anything that happens to where the pick and roll gets compromised, meaning like the roll man gets behind the screen defender, maybe the guard starts to get downhill, or maybe it's a blitz and the ball gets to the short roll guy, he has to step up and basically be the guy who defends whoever it is that's coming down the lane. And so you are now making a very simple read as the guy in the corner, right? If he doesn't go very far, you want to stay in the corner to space. But if he steps up and leaves a vacancy, like kind of a runway for you, that's when you want to cut along the baseline. That's a simple read. That is not as complicated as some of the more complicated reads that Kelly Oubre had to make in Golden State's 5-out offense. And specifically for Golden State, they were a big believer in, like, even when you're open, you don't shoot, you turn and run a DHO for one of their shooters, right? Like Gary Payton's a great example of this. Like the dude will take, if he's just standing wide open, he'll take a shot. But if he catches and he's not in a great position to shoot, and I mean a great position to shoot, he's turning and flowing into a DHO, right? And like so much of there's more high level cutting in the Golden State offense from different spots on the floor. And so again, like those are examples of him improving, making reads within that specific role, operating out of the corner as a spacer, but it's not the same as some of the more, like, because no team in the league runs more action, and I mean literally runs sets out of 5-out than Golden State does. They are as structured an offense as you'll find in the league. Next question. What are your thoughts on Bam's recent three-point attempt streak? Is it sustainable? Why is it taking so long? So in the last 4 games, Bam Adebayo is 5 for 5 from three, including a game winner against the Detroit Pistons, a bomb from about 25 feet at the top of the key. Here's the thing. I don't think Bam needs a three-point shot. And obviously, if you can make it at a high percentage, you want to take it just from the standpoint of shot value. But for me, Bam is in a very similar situation to Giannis. He primarily functions with his athleticism as a cog in their offense. It's different than Giannis because Giannis operates more, kind of on an island trying to attack and score. But what I mean by that is like, I don't think Giannis needs a three-point shot. I think he needs to be able to make shots over contests around the rim. And I mean like before the rim. So like little push shots, floaters, half hooks, short jump shots, things like that matter more to Giannis. That's how I feel about Bam. Great that he made 5 threes, but he misses like half of his shot attempts that aren't dunks within 8 feet of the rim. So like that's the real problem. Like it's more, can you make the floater? Can you make the pop shot in the lane? Can you make the short jump shot or the little hook shot over the defense? Obviously, the three-point shot going in over the last 4 games is good. It's not like it's a bad thing, but like that's not the difference between Bam reaching where he is now and reaching his ultimate potential. To me, he's got to become a guy who can hit 65% of his non-dunks around the rim, and he's just not there right now, and that's where he's holding himself back offensively. I've never heard of a 10th seeded team getting exposed. We knew they sucked. This was after the Warriors lost to the Knicks. Just going to take another example opportunity to talk really quickly about how the Warriors and Lakers are better than their record. The Warriors are 23-16 when both Draymond Green and Steph Curry play. That's a win percentage that if for the whole year they stayed at that level, they would pass the Lakers in the standings, they'd pass the Suns in the standings, they'd pass the Mavericks in the standings, they'd pass the Kings in the standings, they'd be out of the play and they'd be at the 6th seed right now. That's even with everything that's gone wrong this year, if they just had the winning percentage when Steph and Draymond are on the floor together. The Lakers and the Warriors are not on the upper tier. They are not as good as Denver. They're not as good as Boston. I don't even think they're as good as a healthy Minnesota team necessarily. I would be tempted to pick teams like the Bucks and the Clippers over them. But everyone else, every other team in that group, whether it's the Knicks, whether it's the Sixers when they're healthy, whether it's the Suns or the Kings or the Pelicans or the Thunder, like all those teams, I think the Warriors and the Lakers are just as good as them. It's all those teams. It's about matchups, right? Like the Kings just did a number on the Bucks and Lakers and then lost at home the other night. I'm blanking on who they actually lost to in that game, but everybody can lose to anybody on any given night. That's not I think was it the Knicks? I think it was the Knicks. But that group is very matchup oriented. Anybody can beat anybody. It's just like if your weakness aligns with another team's strength, you'll lose in that matchup, but that doesn't mean you're necessarily a worse team because that team's strength might match up differently with another team's strength and weakness, and they might lose that matchup, right? The Lakers and the Warriors are way down in the standings. The Warriors because Draymond Green missed a significant chunk of the season, and the Lakers because they went 3-10 after winning the in-season tournament, which dug them a massive hole in the standings. Outside of the times that Draymond missed, the Warriors have been really good. Outside of that 3-10 stretch after the in-season tournament, the Lakers have been really good. They are better than their records. They are not top-tier contenders. They're not even second-tier contenders, but they're every bit as good as those other teams in those tiers. And if you think just because they're a 9 seed or a 10 seed, that's an accurate representation of how much talent they have on the roster, I think I would disagree with you at that point. Last question. This was in response to the LeBron MJ topic we had at the end of the show yesterday. A hair over LeBron. I said MJ was a hair over LeBron. If you check the criteria for the GOAT of any sport, it's all about dominating the sport for a long enough period of time while winning championships in a dominating fashion. Any case for LeBron James has to do with his longevity in dominating a conference and not the league. His underwhelming finals record speaks to that. Playing longer doesn't make you better unless we are just speaking to the best athlete. Couple things. I technically lean more towards dominating over longevity personally as well. That's why I have MJ hair over LeBron. But a couple of things. First of all, LeBron James dominating the Eastern Conference, I agree with you. It's an overrated kind of thing to talk about, right? Like he has 10 conference championships, 9 of which took place in the Eastern Conference. That's certainly impressive. But yeah, the Eastern Conference was weak more at the top. Like the Eastern Conference is weak now in a different way than it is back in LeBron's era. Like now the East is weak at the bottom, but there are still really good teams at the top every single year, usually 2 or 3 like really good teams. In LeBron's East, there just never was a team remotely as good as them. And so they kicked everyone's ass in the postseason every single year because the best team they'd face would be a Pacers team with Paul George or a Raptors team with DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry. But every time we have this conversation, we gloss over a simple fact. LeBron James has won 4 NBA championships. So forget about the damn conference titles all you want. He has 4 damn championships. Since he came in the league, no player or franchise has won more championships than LeBron. That is a certain level of dominance in its own way. And so, like, again, like, you're right. The conference championship thing is a little bit overblown. Yes, LeBron played in the East, and then he still hoisted the damn Larry O'Brien trophy 4 times, despite a lot of things that worked against him over that span, like the Cavs originally never putting a championship-level roster around him in his first stretch there in Cleveland, like the Kyrie fiasco in 2018, like Anthony Davis's injury history and immediate decline after the 2020 playoff run. Like, if I told you after LeBron convinced AD to come over in the summer of 2019, if I told you, hey, LeBron's going to be really good for all 5 of the next 5 years, you'd be like, okay, they're winning multiple titles. But no, AD had a significant injury stretch and declined as significantly as a player. Went from being a guy who was in contention for the best player in the world to a guy who's a fringe top 10 guy now. Right. And like that is despite all of that, he still hoisted the trophy 4 times. And so again, when we're talking about LeBron's dominance, he's not as dominant as MJ, but he's still pretty damn dominant. I didn't even talk about in that stretch, like literally after LeBron won his 3rd title, the 2 best players beneath him in the league teamed up. He's the best player in the league. He won his 3rd title, just beat a 73-win team, had back-to-back 40-plus point games in the finals, had a stranglehold on the best player in the world title, and then Kevin Durant and Steph Curry teamed up on a team that already had one of the best coaches in the league, the best defender in the league in Draymond Green, the best wing defender in the league in Andre Iguodala, the second best shooter in the league who's also an excellent perimeter defender in Klay Thompson. All of that, plus the 2 players in the league that were right behind LeBron. And he still hoisted the trophy 4 times. So, like, again, I think when we're talking about LeBron James dominance, it's important to view it as different than MJ, but it's not a lack of accomplishment. Like, think about the way Larry Bird is revered. He only has 3 of them, right? Like, it's not. I think that LeBron's like dominance has actually become a little underrated in that regard. Lastly, his playing longer doesn't make you better unless we are just speaking to the best athlete. This I just fundamentally disagree with. Obviously, dominance is the larger factor, as I talked about, but I do think longevity really matters. And the reason why is simple. If I was talking about who the best basketball player ever was, I look at it from the perspective of if I owned a franchise and I had to start from scratch and I could only pick one player in NBA history to start with and I could have their entire career, which player gives me the most opportunity to win the most championships in a vacuum? And if I get 20 years of LeBron James playing at a top 10 level, during which I go like 9 years from 2012 to 2020, I thought he was clearly the best player in the world. So for a 9-year stretch there, he was literally number 1. So I'm getting 9 years of number 1 and an additional 11 years of top 10. And then that first year, but LeBron was still top 20. So like with that being my kind of foundation for bringing in a star player to start my franchise, I have a really good chance to win. And so that's why I look at longevity as also a significant part of the case, because you want to see what ceiling the guy can reach, but how long he stays there is a big indicator. Because again, in the NBA, like a lot of shit can go down. Matchups can be weird, injuries can happen. Sometimes sometimes even though you are in a good position to win the title, just bad things happen and you don't. 2015, another title, LeBron probably wins if his team is healthy. I believe a healthy Kyrie and Kevin Love with LeBron James beat the Warriors in 2015. That's trophy number 5. Like that, like, again, anything can happen. And so that's why getting more cracks at the table, more, pulls at the slot machine, so to speak, give you more opportunities to win. And that's why longevity matters. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting the show. I shouldn't say that's all we have for today. That's all we have for this morning. We will be back tonight, right around about, let's see, the game starts at 7:30 Eastern. So right around like, what's that going to be? Right around like 10 o'clock Eastern, we'll be recording live on YouTube after the final buzzer of Bucks Celtics. I will see you guys then.